one of the key aspects of scaling is content generation. That's how we scale. As much as some of us would love to travel, and I've traveled pretty extensively around the world, as much as we would love to travel and give talks in person, the really scalable way, balanced way, a work-friendly and a family-friendly way is to create content generation. So let's hear from a man who went in his teenage on a road trip with a man and his donkeys on how we can write scalable content.
All right, thank you. Oh, yeah. All right. Donkey Man conversation is something that can happen over beers at the end. Happy to tell you about that. Donkey Man would not drink beer himself, but I'm happy to and chat about that. All right. So before I get into talking about scaling DevRel with content, I want to share a concern that I have, and that is that we've got many beautiful developer evangelists, developer advocates, community managers in the room today. That's terrific, but my concern is who is helping the developers right now? Is it?
That's why you're on Saturday, right?
There's someone with a 401 unauthorized right now, and they might have to actually Google it. But hopefully your excellent documentation is what they'll find, and that's certainly a type of content that we can all agree is important. And yet, when we talk about scaling DevRel, often we think of adding more events and not more content. So you probably all know this view here, or maybe this one's more likely for this group. And I'm trying to find the perfect spot in the room. All right, so, but of course, events is not the only part of DevRel. There's a lot of pieces to it, and we've talked about a lot of them today. A lot of these maybe are event related. If you haven't seen Phil Legater's DevRel-o-meter, you should go check it out. It's pretty cool. But a lot of these are also content, and then many of them also overlap with what would be traditionally marketing. But of course, we all know there is no developer marketing, only teaching and enabling. And in other words, share knowledge, not features, which is a lot easier to do one-on-one when you're talking to the developer, when you're in person. And when that goes to content, a lot of times that ideal gets lost. And so that's why I've been saying share knowledge, not features. Anyone that's worked with me in the last 3 years has heard it already. But that's where I start from when talking about content oriented toward developers. And I'll tell you where that came from. So when I was at ProgrammableWeb, it was my job to read every single API blog that existed. And I saw many posts like this that I came to dread, that were Sumco is proud to announce a major update, yada, yada. I would fall asleep, and then I would remember, oh, right, it's my job to try to figure out what the news is in this. Like, what's important? What does someone actually care about, right? And then when I went to the provider side, I realized that's our job. That's our job to be able to find that story, the story that the developer cares about, and share that. So an alternate title for this talk is You Should Blog More. And if I said that to you, just go ahead and nod. Who agrees they should blog more? I should blog more too. So that's the bulk of the content that I'm going to talk about. We'll touch on a few others as well, but I'll share how I helped scale content mainly through blogging across a few different organizations. So I should first say about the term. So I'm not an English major. I don't care what prepositions you end sentences with. But this one I do care about, and And that is, so the thing that you write is a blog post and it goes on a blog. You don't write a blog. And this may be a lost cause, but I think if all of us in this room could just take that back to our organizations, and I know there are some people here who can evangelize things, so just take that back and maybe we can win that fight. Okay, so when it comes to blogging, you need someone in your organization to own it. And this is the technical side of blogging even. If you have someone else who's doing it, but bringing that technical side, bringing the share knowledge, not features. And when I say own, I mean the way that you own a dog, which is not like a thing that you collect, but rather that you say, I have responsibility for this, right? So someone needs to own the blogging like a dog. Someone needs to champion it and champion that share knowledge, not features approach. And then, of course, someone has to power it, which means writing. And like the talk before, it doesn't just have to be you. It doesn't just have to be one person. It shouldn't be if it's done well. So who is owning, champion, and powering depends on the size of your company. So if you're large, I'm at CenturyLink. We have an entire team to curate and to reach out to others in the organization to write. Hopefully, if you're of size, you have at least one person full-time who is focused on this. And of course, if you're small or tiny, you already know that it's you that's doing it. Doesn't mean you have to be the only one who writes, but it's you that is the champion of it. And if you don't do this already, I'll talk about the thing that you need to do already in a moment, but this question I get all the time. How do you make people write? And I, by the way, tried this approach, and it doesn't work that well. So you have to show the value. You have to be able to say it hits the metrics that we want to hit. It reaches the audience, the same audience that I would talk to one-on-one at a conference. I can reach many times with this content. And this, by the way, is the graph of OpenStreetMap registered users. So that's definitely a very community-oriented group. And so one of the options that you could have is to find outside help. At Orchestrate, which was a small database as a service startup, we would hire code school grads to write some code and write about it. And we would pay them to do it. So you don't have to look within the confines of your own organization. You can reach out to the community and beyond. So this is the piece that you should be doing if you aren't already. If you're the one that's going to power this, you should create an editorial calendar. So planting the stakes so that you can hit your goals. So I get this question all the time too. You know, how many? So I'm going to do an editorial calendar. All right. So how many posts per month should I do? How many posts per week? How many posts per day? Right. And I answer the same way, which is this. Two. Also rock on, but yeah, two. Two is the answer. No matter by asking the question with that blank, you've already defined what time frame you can handle. Right? If you're asking how many per day, all right, you can do it. Two, do it.
How many per
if
year?
you're asking per year, it's still the same. Yes, two, and I think you'll make them really good. All right. So for the calendar, it doesn't matter what you use; it matters that you do it. And I have used all of these before. This is Trello in Calendar View, a Google Spreadsheet, a Google Calendar, Asana in Calendar View. That's a Word doc, not my favorite, but and then just a plain text file. So it doesn't matter what you use, but that you are planning what you're going to write. And by planning, I mean two things. So it needs to be visible. So hopefully organization-wide, because you want to push this out in your whole organization, saying, hey, let's all share our knowledge. But then also it has to be specific. So not that Victor's going to write a blog post on Tuesday.
This one is not.
That's what he's doing now? Okay, so So hopefully what Victor has is a very specific blog post that he's going to write, all the way with a title. So no headline goes here. So being very specific about what it is, because you're much more likely to actually get results if you've laid it out directly that way. So another thing that helps if you're trying to spread this message within your group to create more content is to be able to outline the types of posts that you might create. Be able to create templates of them, be able to at least describe a post of this type looks like this. So you might have an interview post where you reach out to someone with a point of view in the community. Email interview, and that could directly turn into a blog post. You might have someone in your organization who has very strong opinions that you want to get out there, and maybe you have to interview them to get it out there, or maybe they decide to write it up and you help to turn that into something that goes out there. Sharing how you work, especially if developers are your audience, they want to know how your engineers build the thing that you're talking about. So share that. Absolutely, customer examples are fair game. It doesn't have to be a full-blown case study. Don't overthink it. Work with your customer to show up an example. They may even write it for you. And you can have these roundups of useful tools, whether they're technical tools or whether they're the things that go in your evangelist travel kit. And of course, the meat and potatoes of technical blog posts, developer-focused content is definitely the tutorial. And that can then filter into many other areas. You can reuse that same content in other ways. If it's some code, turn it into a sample app that can easily be copied and downloaded. Have a demo running of that so you can see what it is before you actually go and build it. Make it so easy that it's just a click of a button to deploy it and see the app, and then you can go and make your changes, right? And of course, you're getting started type of content. Tutorials could end up in there as well. And if you don't have any getting started, forget everything I've said about focusing on the blog and work on your getting started content first. If you already have it, you can return to it and work on that time to first hello world. See if you can decrease that. Make it even easier to get started. And then lastly, sharing use cases I think is really important. So, and these may come out of tutorials for particular use cases too. At ProgrammableWeb, a lot of new API providers would say, well, I don't want to hold back the imagination of the developer. So I'm not going to tell them any ways that they could use our API. And you need to seed the creativity. You need to give them some idea of how they might use it. And then I know once they've played around with it, then they'll be creative. But you need to seed it with those use cases. I mentioned documentation briefly. It's very important. I'm not going to talk much more about it other than to share an ancient text related to documentation, which is a tweet from 2012. That was many years ago. Yeah. And I shared this mainly to bug John Sheehan because my most retweeted tweet that year was something he said. And I put it up there so that you can go and fave and retweet it and give him notifications. And that's at the Doobly link / thanks, John Sheehan. All right, so talking beyond the blog. These are some things you may want to do and may not. Depends on your audience. Whitepapers being one of them. Certainly one that maybe developers don't always like. Ebooks. Wait, is that this? Yeah, I don't know the difference between them. I think it's if you want to sound smart, you publish a white paper, and if you want someone to actually read it, you call it an ebook. I think that's how it is. So, but understand the audience that would use it. And so if your entire audience is developers, they might not want to read a white paper or an ebook. You have to know what your customers drink. And in the API world, this was mentioned briefly earlier, it comes kind of in two flavors. You have the API as the table upon which your service, which is the beer, sits, or the entire company is the API. The API is the beer. The beer is, of course, the thing your customer wants. So you're working with developers. No matter what, they're interested in the API. If you have an API, they're interested in the technology. But if your API supports a service, then you're definitely going to have to talk to the audience that also is interested in the beer, in the service, right? So that's where you especially should reconsider the types of content and make sure that you're talking to the audience. And that goes for webinars as well. And I've seen developer webinars go well. So it's not necessary that developers always hate webinars. I think it can work, depends on your audience. And videos, I think everyone loves videos, whether it's a screencast or whether it's your beautiful face talking to developers.
Or a movie.
So, or a movie. So obviously many types of content. I'm going to go English major one more time here, and that's to say, even though I have said content 50 times this talk, I really don't like the term. I don't like, it's fine for us to call it content, but when you're talking to the person who will actually consume it, don't call it content. Call it what it is, a tutorial, a getting started guide, because again, you're sharing knowledge, and the content, calling it content is kind of the features within that. And so, to no surprise to anyone, I have a blog version of this talk at shareknowledgenotfeatures.com, and we can talk about it here the rest of the day. And you can find me on Twitter. Thanks.